Hey everybody, it's the Treatment Free Beekeeping Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Solomon. In this episode, I have Anthony Vivino, and yes, he's of those Vivinos. And we had a really great conversation. He seems like a guy that's got a very similar sort of approach to life and beekeeping that I do, so it was a real congruent sort of conversation. I think it was a lot of fun. We talked about a lot of stuff. He is a new beekeeper. This is his first year of actually having bees. And he actually came to visit me some years ago, and I apparently spent a bunch of time talking to him about bees. So it's good to get back in touch with him. We got carried away, so this is maybe a little bit longer of an episode. Look, if you're expecting an hour-long episode every episode, I'm gonna over provide. All right, sometimes some episodes are gonna be long. I love long episodes. If it's good information, just keep sending it. There's no reason to cut stuff. Just keep talking. If it's good stuff, let's keep going. So this is one of those. It's another Layens Hive episode. Anthony has built his own Layens hives. So if you're into Layens hives, or you're just into stories about catching swarms and keeping bees and building your own stuff and all the usual stuff we talk about here, just sit back and relax. If you're driving, you can sit back and relax. If you have a self-driving car, you can really sit back and relax. That'd be awesome. Or you might actually be beekeeping while you're doing this. I do that often, listen to podcasts while I'm working on the bees. Anyway, enough of the nonsense. Let's get to the conversation. Anthony, thanks for taking the time to come hang out with me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, actually.
Well, why don't you tell me how you got into beekeeping?
So it's kind of an interesting story. Back, I would say 2013, 14, somewhere in there, I worked with a guy. We did a lot of contract work. We traveled around different states in the country and worked in different places. And one day I met up with him. I said, "Frank, how are things going?" He goes, "Oh, I'm getting into beekeeping." And he was very knowledgeable about the subject, was telling me all about, and I didn't know anything about it at that point. Basically, what he was telling me about was how he was purchasing a package, just one single package. He bought all this beekeeping equipment, and it was going to be a project that he was going to do with his grandson. And every night that we worked night shift, every night that we worked together, I said, "Frank, teach me something more about these bees," because it was so interesting. And some time went by, and it was like 2016 or so, and I was talking with him. No, would have been 15. And I said to him, how are those bees going? He goes, "Oh," he said, "they died, and my grandson didn't have much interest, and so I sold everything." And in the conversation, he let me know that he had sold it at a discount, of course. And so we hear that's a story. You've talked about that in the podcast many times. So anyway, I guess it would have been 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years ago, the subject of beekeeping came up again, and it's always interested me. And I have a couple of buddies here in my neighborhood. One is Jason. You and he have talked. I guess he was the president or whatever his title was of the local beekeeping chapter here, and you had done a speaking engagement with them. Anyway, so he turned me on to your podcast, and also he's a treatment-free beekeeper. And another buddy of mine is, he kind of treats sometimes, but doesn't others. And, so that's his process. And then I've got another buddy of mine who is just total full on, believes in treatments, and that's the way that it must be. And, you know how those conversations go. So, Jason told me something that you also have said many times in your podcast. You said, and it's great advice. I followed it. Don't get any bees until you've studied the subject for at least a year. And that's exactly what I did. I read everything I could find on the internet from reputable sources. I listened to your podcast, some YouTubes from a couple of different folks, and I got to go into my one friend that does treatments every now and again, depends on what he thinks is necessary. went into his hive and I got my first bee sting. And then the next day we went into, or maybe it was that same day, I don't know, we went into Jason's hives. And then it was shortly after that I was taking a trip to Crescent City, California, where my brother lived before he passed away. And I heard you say in a podcast, hey, if you're ever in this area, get in contact with me and we'll set up a time and I'll take you around and show you my apiary. And sure as you said, I shot you an email, or I forget how we got in contact. And I said, hey, I'm going to be traveling through on Sunday. And you're like, yeah, sure. Come on over. And do you remember taking me around that day? Probably not.
Nope.
No.
I'm sitting here trying to remember who you are.
Well, I've got a bunch of pictures to prove what I'm saying is true. But no, here's what I said when I got back. I said, he spent 3 hours with me in his bee yard, and he explained in detail everything he was doing. I learned so much. And then I looked at Jason. I said, I told him all the stuff we did. I said, how long do you think that would have taken if he didn't? He goes, probably about an hour. If he's an experienced beekeeper, it would probably take him an hour, but it took an extra 2 hours to explain everything to you. And but I remember one thing you said. You asked me, you go, have you ever been stung? And I said, yeah, once. And you went, uh-oh. And I said, well, no, isn't that a good thing? He goes, but you said, yeah, if you get stung it's the second time that you get stung that you'll know if you've got a reaction or not.
Yeah.
But we met. You took me up an embankment, up through a hill, through some trees, and there we were.
Yes. Okay.
You had a bunch of work that you did, a couple hives. You did a couple splits. I don't remember all exactly what we did. But so at that point, I still didn't have any bees. I had a growing knowledge. I've got a pretty good brain when it comes to intellectual facts. Other things, not so much. But like I said, did a bunch of studying, a bunch of learning, and I started spending time in the Facebook groups. And the hardest part for me was keeping my mouth shut. But what I liked doing was when somebody posted a question, before I looked at the responses, I would think, how would I answer that? And sure enough, I had about a 70% of the time I had the right answer. Maybe I was wrong in a couple things, but 70% of the time I had the general concept right of what to do. So I started building my hives. One of your podcasts, you had Dr. Leo Sharaskin on, and I was intrigued with the Lands hive. I looked up his website, did a bunch of research there, and I decided that was the direction I wanted to go. One of the pieces of advice that I really like from you is if you're not going to be a commercial migratory beekeeper, why treat your bees like you're a commercial migratory beekeeper. And so I really like the lands. Another one of my favorite hobbies is woodworking. And so I built two 30-frame lands, and I built them so that I could put three colonies in. So 3 entrances and with divider boards and all that other stuff. By the time I got my boxes finished, I was past the season for last year. So last year would have been, I've got my 1 year of studying. I'm still hot and heavy on this. I still want to do this, but I missed the boat, and I didn't want to buy any bees. And then this year I had everything ready. Swarm season came along, and here I am. I've got 2 really, really good hives. I mean, there's bees coming and going. We went in, did an inspection on them. That's a whole other story. I'd like to share that here in a little bit. But so I got 2 swarms, and now I feel like I'm in business, and I've been stung. Let's see, 1 + 6 is 7, + 1 is 8. Been stung 8 times this season. And so Jason told me, he goes, you're not a real beekeeper until you've been stung by your own bees. And so, yeah. So now I guess I can consider myself a real beekeeper. So the next big hurdle is overwintering. I don't know if we've mentioned it or not, but I'm in southeast Idaho. We get some pretty cold winters. This last one was pretty mild. I think like -10 was the coldest, but our below zero time frame was a lot shorter than this. Normally we'll go a week or 2 and never get above 0.
Southeast Idaho. See, when I was an engineer, I worked on the Union Pacific Engine Shop wastewater treatment facility in Pocatello.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
I never got to visit, but I was working on the design.
Oh, so you were remote. Yeah. So Pocatello is about, depends on what part of Pocatello, 45 minutes to an hour away from, and also on traffic from where I live. So yeah, that is definitely Southeast Idaho.
So when we're talking about your beekeeping, we are talking about higher elevations. What's your elevation there?
5,000 feet.
5,000. That's pretty good. What kind of normal temperatures and conditions do you have throughout the year?
So, wintertime, very, very cold, lots of snow. We'll start warming up. Our swarm season starts, late May, and it'll go through June. I'm hoping to get at least 2 more swarms. We'll see where that goes with that. So then, bees will be active until late August, early September. They'll start slowing down, and then everything goes into wintertime.
How much snow do you have generally? How deep and for how long?
So if I travel, if I go up in the hills, there's a lot more, but sometimes we'll get a snowstorm of a couple inches. Sometimes we'll get a snowstorm of a couple feet. And once it starts falling from the first time it sticks, and that's in, I could be wrong on this, October, we'll start getting snow sometimes, maybe November. But once it's here to stay until March, April timeframe.
Okay. I always like to ask these questions because, as you know, I always say all beekeeping is local. So
absolutely,
when we're talking about the way that you're keeping bees, then we need to take into account where you are and the conditions that you're dealing with.
Yes. Yeah. And then, we'll get snow sometimes randomly. Like we had snow on May 23rd. I had 2 hives, both swarms, caught here local, and I had an inch of snow on top of my laying hive, for about a day. And then the next day it all melted. So we've had snow in the middle of July here. So it's just kind of, it'll come in and then it's gone, the next day because the temperatures come back up. But it is unpredictable. The common saying is, if you don't like the weather in Southeast Idaho, wait 5 minutes.
Yeah, you would be surprised how many places claim that saying. Not always 5 minutes, but yeah.
Yeah.
We're having a very weird June right now. We are having record low highs.
Oh, okay. I follow you there.
So normally it's pretty warm, and it is currently, I'm looking at it's currently 62. It's been raining. It's been very cool. Haven't needed to use my irrigation outside. Haven't had to water the yard or anything. It's just been cold. The bees have been fairly cooped up. We got some brief sunshine today, but it was cool enough that most of them we were staying inside and keeping the hive warm, and I had to get in and do some things because I'm growing my nukes right now, and I had to get in and do some things to keep them from overgrowing their available space over the next week because I'm going to be gone. And when I open up the hive, one of the things that you can tell when you open up a hive like that is they will, if it's cool, a lot of bees will come up on top of the top bars and sort of form a bee wall, insulating wall to keep some of the heat inside the hive.
That's fascinating.
Which, as you are working with Lands hives, is supposed to be one of the benefits of Lands hives being a top bar style hive, where when you open the hive, you are not opening the entire top of the hive because each top bar forms its own section of lid.
Yeah. I can take the outer cover off and still not penetrate the hive, I guess is the right way to say that.
Yeah, break the envelope, I've heard it said. So what else?
Let me jump into my story about my first swarm. So I'd gone on a couple of swarm calls with Jason. Went to a golf course. This is kind of funny, and if he listens or when he listens to this, he'll laugh. He calls me up. He says, "Hey, I'm going to go pick up a swarm. You want to go with me?" I was like, "Absolutely." And so he swings by, picks me up, and we head out to this golf course. And he had a relationship with the people at the golf course. And we get there, we hop out of his van, put some equipment on the golf cart, and it's me and my son, and he and his son. And we're going up over these peaks and into these valleys on this golf course, and I'm just holding on for dear life. It was a blast. It was so much fun. But we drive all the way out to what had to be the far side of the golf course. It's the sun is setting. He'd already put a box out there, and we covered it up. We got the rest of the bees in it, and carted them home. So that was a lot of fun. And then so fast forward to May 16th of this year. Swarms have been coming, and my Jason and my other friend Bo, they'd gotten a couple swarms, and things were going good. And I'm like, oh, I'm jonesing for a swarm. I need to get a swarm. And I'm in Lowe's getting some stuff for my apiary. I needed to get some cinder blocks to put in. I'm trying to level out all the floor, which that's a question I want to ask you, is what's the best floor or, ground cover for an apiary, but we'll come back to that. So I've got one of these big heavy carts. I've got 20 cinder blocks for that project. I've got 16 60-pound bags of concrete for another project. And then I got a couple other little things. And I'm waiting in line. And all of a sudden, my phone, I get a text from a buddy of mine. Hey, there's a swarm. And his coworker, he's not into bees, but he knows that I am. So he contacted me about another coworker. So I get in touch with our other coworker, and I said, hey, I can be there in an hour. And she goes, okay. And so I pay for everything, get in my truck, drive home, drop everything off, unload the truck, all these cinder blocks, all this concrete. I load up my swarm trap, my bee suit, and all this stuff, totally unprepared. And I called home, and my wife's like, what can I do? What can I do to help? And I'm like, get the ladder, get this, get that. And when I pull up, she had everything there, and unload everything, load everything for the swarm into my truck, and I drive out. I pulled into the third coworker, the lady with the swarm. I pulled into her driveway at 59 minutes. So I told her I'd be there an hour. I got there in 59 minutes. And the funnest thing I think about that swarm was the enlightenment and the education that I was able to give those people, because they had tons of questions. So I work in the nuclear and radiological world. I'm an instructor for industrial safety.
Oh.
And the lady who had the swarm, she recognized me right away. And she said to her husband, this is Anthony. He's one of my trainers. And I'm like, oh, that's no pressure. So anyway, they had a bunch of questions, and I was just kind of teaching them. And I'd already texted Jason, and he was going to meet me there. And they were about, I'd say 15 or 16 feet up in a tree, in a pine tree. And my ladder was tall enough that I could safely stand on it and shake them into the box. So he gets there. It's my younger son, Zachary, and then he shows up, and I go, okay, so here's my plan. I'm going to set the ladder up here. I'm going to reach over there. I'm going to hold this underneath there. I'm going to shake him into the box, lower him in. He goes, do it. He goes, what do you need me for? I'm like, sweet. And so I and they were docile, super docile. And we were talking with the homeowner, and she was like, now, are they going to be angry? I said, no. And I explained to them everything I knew about swarms. And they were like, well, what about this? And where's the queen? And how does all this work? And why are they swarming? And so I just got to go through so much of what I'd been learning, teaching these people. And it was just so much fun. Anyway, the swarm collection was rather simple. Shook them into a box, dumped them into the swarm trap, the lay-ins swarm traps that I have, and explained to her. I said, sunsets in about 2 hours, 3 hours, something like that. Do you mind if I come back sometime right around then? And they should all be happily in the box. As long as I got the queen, they'll be happily in the box. And she's like, yeah, sure, no problem. We actually did a double date with Jason, his wife, my wife, and I. And after dinner, we drove over there, and I put the lid on, and I put them in. This is funny. Put them in the back of my wife's car, and she was like, they're not going to get free, are they? I said, no, they're secure. And drove them back, and they've been happy. Now, I inspected that hive last week. Yeah, it was last week. And the plan was, so I've got one of Jason's Langstroths in my apiary, and we went in, we checked them out, and then he got a call and had to leave, and I needed to go and do an inspection. And one of the things that my takeaways is that I had all this book learning and YouTube learning and podcast learning, and while all that's important, the rubber doesn't meet the road until you open that hive and you start pulling frames out and inspecting and looking for the queen and all the other stuff. So that's something that I'll always want to remember after I can say I'm an experienced beekeeper, is not to forget what it's like doing that first inspection on your own when you're not sure if you're really messing this up or not. So that's swarm number one.
Nice. While we're sharing swarm stories, I've got a new one.
Okay.
When was it? 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was just sitting around minding my own business. I don't remember what I was doing. And my brother calls me and says, "Hey, there's a swarm on such and such a road intersection. It's hanging on the fence." I said, "Okay, I'm getting in the car and head right out there." So I head out there. It's about I don't know, 35, 40-minute drive.
Oh.
So I get there, and sure enough, there it is right on the side of the corner of the fence at this intersection. And I look over, and there's a bee yard, like a commercial bee yard.
Oh.
And so I texted him back. I was like, "You didn't tell me there was a bee yard right next to it." And he's like, I didn't see it. I wasn't looking for it. I just saw the bees." It's like, okay. So the swarm is huge. And this is why I'm often so glad that I bring the 10-frame box sometimes. Sometimes I'll bring the 5-frame box. If I got time to prepare, a lot of times I'll bring both, just, depending on the size of the swarm. But the 10-frame box usually takes care of everything. And this swarm was very large. What did I estimate? I was telling the TFB monitors, I think I estimated like 8 pounds or 12 pounds or something. Anyway, quite large. And so I get my box out and I set it up against the fence. This fence is covered in, I think it's called vetch, this kind of viney weed, and you can't really shake anything to get the bees. I'm like shaking like sections of the weeds to try and get the bees to go in the box, and they're kind of going, some of them are going. And then the beekeeper pulls up, and of course I'm had my car parked right in his driveway to get into his bee yard. First, the guy who owns the property, or the guy who manages the property, he said, "Are you with so and so?" And I'm like, "No." "Who's so and so?" He's the beekeeper." Okay. Anyway, so then the beekeeper shows up. And, I'm kind of nervous, thinking, he might be a little upset with me for being out here catching his bees. And sure enough, no, he was like, "Yeah, if I was doing my job, there wouldn't be any swarms. So, you just have fun." So meanwhile, I'm waiting there, and the bees are taking their sweet time to move into the box. Uh-huh. And this is another, I've talked about it a couple times on the TFB group this year. There seems to be so many multiple queen swarms around this year. And the way you can tell that is if you're trying to coax a swarm into a box, you'll get about half the bees will move into the box, and about half the bees will hang on the outside or just not move in for some reason. And so I had this happen already before when one of my mini nukes, my queen castles, swarmed. And like all 3 of the queen castles swarmed at once, and the whole swarm settled on a branch, and there were like probably 3 queens in it, and I recovered 2 of them and hived the rest. Anyway, so this gigantic swarm was acting like a 2-queen swarm, because after a while, no more of the bees were moving in. And so after the beekeeper showed up, he'd opened the gate and he told me I could go inside the fence and keep working on it if I wanted.
Oh, that was nice.
So I took the box around to the inside of the fence where I could get to the swarm, because on the outside of the fence, like, most of the bees were hanging actually on the inside of the fence, so I couldn't really get to them. And so I take the box to the other side, shake some more of the bees in there, and after like 2 or 3 attempts to shake them into the box, finally they all start moving into the box. So I don't know if the queen got lost or flew away or Or maybe she decided to move in. Maybe there was a fight. Maybe it's a multi-queen hive. I don't know. Eventually, they mostly all moved in. By this time, there's a lot of shaking, a lot of moving around. They weren't particularly happy. This is one of those swarms that after a while they get annoyed with you, and you'll get a couple of bees that that will sting you. It happens sometimes.
Yeah.
So I moved it in, sprayed them liberally with water. That helps them to move in. Because a lot of times they'll just hang on the outside of the box if it's real warm outside, which it was that day. So spray them really well. They moved in the box, closed it all up, and brought them home. Set them out in the yard, and I was worried about the hives swarming out again because it was a really hot day, and swarms are sensitive to high temperatures. If they move into a box and it's too hot, they will move right back out again because, they're anthropomorphically, they are thinking that this home is not suitable because it's too hot. So, what I did was this 10-frame box that I use has the bottom attached, and it has a disc entrance with, disc entrances. It got one open hole, one closed section, one screen section, and one queen excluder section. So I closed it. When I opened it back up when I got home, I put it on the queen excluder section to make sure no queens got out. And then I shaded the box with a big cardboard box. I don't know if that probably didn't help, but I was trying to do what I could do. And sure enough, I don't know if it was that day or the next day, but I look outside and there's this huge cloud of bees trying to swarm out of this hive. And, it look like what you'd normally call like a false swarm. They'll swarm out and then they'll realize they don't have the queen, and so they'll all fly back.
And then they'll go back in. And
so after about 3 days of them trying to get away and realizing they can't get away, they finally accepted the box. And then after about a week or so, I opened up the entrance fully, and I checked on them today, and they had that 10-frame box completely full. And so I put 2 more mediums on top. So,
wow.
Yeah, both of those swarms that I caught are now needing supers. And of course, all I've been experimenting with the tiny walkaway splits, and none of them are ready to move beyond one full box yet. About half of them have moved into a full box. None of them have been ready to move into anything else yet. So a little slow. But that's kind of what you're dealing with when you're dealing with such small splits.
Yeah. So I don't, on my 2 swarms, I don't think either one of them is big enough, to do a split on yet. I want to do that. So with your expansion beekeeping model, I want to go into this winter with 6 hives. Like I said, I've got 2 30-frame lay-ins that I've got set up with divider boards so that I can have basically the equivalent of 6 10-frame lay-ins. So that's what I'm hoping for. Now, how do you know when you get a swarm? How do you is it like you look at it and you go, okay, this group, this is ready to split right now, or how do you gauge that?
I think the important thing to pay attention to when you're looking for a second split like that is pay attention to the brood cycle. Because what you're going to have when you install the swarm into the box is you're going to have that original cohort of bees.
Right.
And they're going to be your nurse bees and then your foragers early in the process, right?
Yeah.
So that hive is then going to raise a cycle of brood. It's really helpful if they have comb to work with to start out. That really gives them a boost. But if you don't have that, that's fine. It just takes a little bit more time. And so as you're paying attention to the population dynamics during this process, right, your hive is going to have its maximum population on day 1 installation day. Over the next 3 weeks, as that first cohort of new brood goes from egg to larva to pupa to adult, it takes 3 weeks, your population is going to be dropping.
Right.
And then as that new brood begins to hatch, it's going to the curve is going to slowly turn back upward again in your population. Once you've got that population growing again, and depending on the size of the available resources and bees and comb and brood, that's when you can start to think about splitting again. Now, your split there is going to be weaker the earlier you do it, because that growth is going to continue until they reach a plateau where the new brood is going to be in equal measure replacing the old bees that are dying off.
Right. Okay. So that gives me a good gauge, and it tells me that so far I've been doing it right, because when I did the inspection on Swarm 1, okay, so this is another thing that cracks me up about myself. I'm ultra analytical, and I love the way you approach it, where you're like, yeah, I can have a maximum of, 24 hives, because after that I start to lose track. With me, I've got, you're going to laugh, every single one of my frames has a serial number. Every single slot in my lands has a number. I'm calling it the address, right? The hives are numbered. And what I learned when I did that first inspection, leads me to believe that you're on the right track and I'm on the wrong track. Is there was so much going on. I didn't have a chance to write anything down. And I feel like I went 10 rounds with Muhammad Ali by the time I got done.
Mm-hmm.
I was hot. I was sweaty. I had broke some comb. I felt so terrible about that. When all was said and done, and I had, normally I work Monday through Thursday, but this was on a Friday, and I had a commitment that I had to go back to my office at 4:00, and that was approaching. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go downstairs to my office in my house, where it's nice and cool and dark. And I'm hot and sweaty, so dirty I wouldn't even pretend to sit on any furniture in the house. I just laid there on the floor. I sighed deeply and I go, this will get better. I'll get better at this. This too will pass. So,
that's true.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of people, share this similar stories, in different, beekeeping groups and on your podcast and stuff like that. So next weekend, I'm looking at going into swarm number 2, which, can I tell you about that story?
Sure.
All right. So it's Memorial Day, and I forget what I'm doing. My phone rings. It's Jason calling me. And so he's been doing this for quite a while, and he's got his number and his contact information for swarm calls out all over the place. And he goes, hey, I'm out of town right now. I just got a call. There's a swarm. Do you want to go get it? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, okay. So he sends me the address, sends me a picture of it, and it was a decent sized swarm. And so I go up. It's a really beautiful part of town up in the hills, beautiful property. And you walk down through their backyard, their side yard, down way out to the back. And these folks are into bird watching, and they're setting up their property as a bird sanctuary. Huge property, and they've got things to encourage birds to live there, and they're into photography and stuff like that. So they walk me down, they show me what's going on, and I explained to them, they're docile when they're swarming. I said Hollywood makes it look like they're out to get everybody. I said, but really what they're doing is, and I kind of described what's going on. So they're all interested, and the one lady, she says, well, I'm going to take some pictures, and she starts walking up to her house, which is, like I said, is a big property, pretty far away. And I said, well, you might not be able to get very good pictures from there. I said, they're pretty docile. I said, I'm wearing my bee suit, just in case. That's just me. Some people do this without a veil or anything. And she smiled and she says, well, she goes, we've got some pretty good photography equipment. And then I saw the lens, and it was like the length of a baseball bat. So, yeah. So after going on at length about how bees, when they're in a swarm, are docile. They fatten themselves up on honey, and they're all about protecting the queen. They're not about, going after you or anything like that. It's on this tree, and the branch that it's on is about, 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches in diameter. And then it forks from there. So it's kind of thick. Ability to shake it was sort of there, but there's lots of other branches in the way. Well, I put my hand, now I'm wearing it's a half bee suit, so from waist up, and I don't have any gloves. I'm comfortable enough with working bees bare hand. And so I've got my box underneath them, and I go to start shaking, and I shake about 3 times, and all of a sudden, zing! I feel that hot poke right in my bicep on the arm that I'm shaking. Mm-hmm. And before I can deal with that one, I feel another one, and then another one. I got stung 3 times in about 3 seconds. And I'm trying to like be cool, and they're all back there taking video of me. So anyway, so I shake them all. I get them all into the box. And again, I'm using it's a 6-frame lay-in swarm trap. And they're super cool. I totally just followed Dr. Shuraskin's plans on his website. Anyway, I'm feeling pretty confident, and I explained to him, just like Jason taught me, hey, there's still a lot of bees out there. I'm pretty positive that the queen is down here in the box, and they're all about protecting the queen. So I'll come back if it's okay with you right around sunset, and all the bees will be in the box around their queen, and it'll be as simple as me putting this lid on this box and walking away. And they're like, okay, great. You're welcome back, and we'll see you then. So me saying that it was simple was I think the curse that I placed on myself. So I leave, I come home and take care of some other chores, and I'm about ready to get in the truck to go back up to collect this hive, and my phone rings again. And it was Jason. And he says, hey, I just got a call from the homeowner. All the bees are back in the tree. And I was like, oh no, what does that mean? And he goes, it means you didn't get the queen. I'm like, how is that even possible? So so we're talking about strategy, and I said, hey, did you say you have a bee vac? And he goes, yeah, I've got one. It's in my garage. And he goes, but I'm out of town. And he gives me his code. And don't worry, Jason, I'm not going to say it on the podcast, in case you might be wondering that. If I even remember it, I don't even think I remember it. But anyway, so I go and get his bee.
The code is 4.
What's that?
The code is 4.
Yeah, 4444. So anyway, so I get his bee vac. And I drive up there, and these people thought it was the coolest thing since sliced bread that I had a vacuum for bees. And they couldn't get over how I was vacuuming the tree. So anyway, so it took using that bee vac. First time I'd ever use it, and I'm on the phone with Jason going, it doesn't suck very well. And he goes, well, it's not supposed to, because if it didn't have a side vent, then it would injure the bees when you're sucking them in. I'm like, oh, good point. Okay. So, yeah, so I vacuumed them all up until there was like a dozen bees left that I couldn't get. And that brought them home, and they've stayed, and they've been actually pretty busy. So not to keep saying, well, I heard on a previous podcast, but I heard on a previous podcast, it was on your one, I think his name was Joshua, the gentleman that is getting into bees, doesn't have any bees yet.
Yep.
Awesome podcast. I really enjoyed that one. You were mentioning about how, you can sit mesmerized in front of your hive for, hours. And yeah, I was like shaking my head going, yep, that's me. So I'll watch, and I'll set the timer on my phone for 1 minute, and I'll count how many bees come out. And I don't know, Jason, I've told Jason about this, and I've also told Bo about this. And we've got this theory that you might be able to relate the size and strength of the hive based on the numbers and comings and goings of bees out of the entrance. So I'm counting there's 60 to 70 takeoffs per minute out of these swarms. So do you have any data or experience with or recollection with that connection?
Not specifically just counting the number of bees coming out. I've never done that. But I do think you can definitely get an idea of the position of the hive and what they're up to, and if they're queenless, if they're raising brood, you can follow how much pollen is coming in. If you pay attention to the pollen coming in at different times of the day, you'll get more pollen in the morning, and eventually, if there's too many bees in your area, they will run out of pollen in the evening. Most of the pollen will have been collected for that day.
Oh.
So one of the ways you can tell you're overpopulating your area is if, the pollen stops at before noon. I've been told.
Because I've seen them coming in, and I can see the ones that are coming in with pollen. But I've not made any connection with time of day. I haven't really paid attention to that. That's interesting.
Bringing in pollen is generally equated to raising brood, because bees, and I just kind of proved that to myself a little bit today. I was upgrading my nukes from 5 frames to 10 frames and came across one that was queenless. And you'll find that even a queenless hive will bring in a bit of nectar still, but they won't bring in hardly any pollen. Maybe some, but not very much.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
What else? As far as numbers coming and going, that could be a relative measure because, like, for instance, a day like today when it's cool, you might be having a lot fewer bees fly than normal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so there's going to be other variables in there that would be hard to statistically map out.
Time of day, of course, also is going to be related to temperature.
Yeah. Oh, so going along with what you were just saying about being able to tell if if a hive might be queenless by no pollen coming in. I got another story. This has to do with one of Jason's Langstroths. And I ought to quit telling his story because maybe we were hoping to have him in on this. He might get in contact with you and see if there's an opening for him to talk.
Yeah, would love to.
But so he calls me up and he said, "Hey, I've got this going on. I'm out of town. Can you go over and check the Langstroth in my backyard?" Sure. So the thought was that they might be queenless. He already had that thought, and it's about sunset. And I go walking up. My bee suit was back in my truck, and there's a ball. I don't know, maybe a fist size. Oh, this is when he was asking me to move that over to my house. So I walk over and there's a ball, right outside the entrance, and I'm just walking up to look around to see what's going on. When a couple of them start coming at me, I'm like, "Oh, you guys are." Can I say pissy? Is that a bad word?
I'll allow
it. They were just an unhappy group, and they start coming at me. I'm like, "Oh, back to my truck, get my bee suit." And so I walk over there and I put a ratchet strap around it, and I'm getting ready to move it out to my truck. And they were just coming at me. You know how you feel them when they're hitting into the veil and you can hear them go dink, 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 right?
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, I need to rethink this and I need to talk to Jason. So I think I'm getting my details mixed up. Anyway, I think this is how it went. Anyway, so I walk out I'm walking further and further away through his side yard, and they're bonking into me fewer and fewer and fewer, and pretty soon there's just one, and this thing was determined to get to me. And then I got all the way out to the street, out by my truck, and I don't feel it hitting me anymore. I take off my bee suit, and all of a sudden I hear zzz, ding, ow! It stung me right above my eyebrow, and I'm like, and I wasn't even doing anything to you. So another testament to how their behavior is different when there's a queenless situation.
Yep, that's very true.
So, okay. So here's a question. My apiary is pretty much a blank slate right now. It's in the southeast corner of my property. I'm on a small property. It's a third of an acre. Southeast corner is dedicated to bees, and I laid weed paper down, and I've got some dirt on top of that so it doesn't fly away. And my wife we're gonna build some planters. My wife's gonna put flowers all around the edges to make it look nice, and then so that they've got something to look at and pollinate. But what's a good flooring for an apiary? Or what makes a bad one, or what makes a good one? Either way.
I've seen a bunch of different things used. I personally just leave it grass because, I just mow between the hives and then once in a while go out there with a weed whacker and tidy it up a little bit. Uh-huh. So it doesn't really bother me a whole lot. If you want even more tidy, I have seen plywood used. Just lay plywood down and it'll last a number of years before it rots completely away.
Huh. Okay. What about would brick be bad for any reason?
I don't think so. It would hold heat a little bit in the evening, and it might be a little cold in the morning, but I wouldn't expect that would cause any problems.
Okay. Because I'm still trying to wrap my brain. So it sounds like there's not a lot of bad options.
I have seen old carpet used, and I would not recommend that because that is not biodegradable and becomes a huge mess to clean up.
Oh yeah.
You're just going to end up with a bunch of polyester fibers stuck in your soil.
Yeah, that's probably not a good plan.
So I wouldn't recommend that, but old plywood, I've got old plywood laying around. I re-roofed my house this last year, and I've got a pile of old plywood around. I hadn't thought of that. I could use that, but what else?
So here's the next. So I've read a couple places where one's like new topic, queen rearing. That's only for experienced beekeepers of many years, and I've listened to your podcasts about building queen castle and all that other stuff, and it's really intrigued me. And I really thinking about doing it, but I don't know that I'll have the time to really get into it this year. What are your thoughts on that? Brand new beekeeper. I've got 2 swarms and hoping to go into winter with 6 hives. Is that something? Is there something better to spend my time on and pick that up next season, or should I just go for it? In your opinion?
I don't personally think it's an advanced topic. I like to say that the way you learn it is the way you learn it. I've been told many times that you should tell people to treat initially, learn how to treat, learn how to keep bees that way, and then do treatment free. And I'm like, well, you're wasting a bunch of information, brain space on learning how to treat, which is something you don't intend on doing anyway.
Right.
And furthermore, as you do things, the way you learn it is the way you do it. And so if you start learning how to do queens early, then that'll just be the way you do it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's not difficult. It does have some intricacies, some things that you got to pay attention to. There's a lot of fine details that you may not understand at first. The old beekeepers, and you can find old beekeeping books on Michael Bush's website.
Yeah, I heard you mention that, and I went over there poking around and found a couple of really good resources over there.
Yeah, so they have their methods of doing it, and again, all beekeeping is local, so their methods might have been great for Illinois or wherever they were, but if you're not in Illinois, maybe start with what Illinois does and adapt it to fit what you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm interested. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm interested in the idea of queen castles in Layens hives.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say, because with the Dan Harden method, which is on your website, you've got the box on the Langstroth where you make it so that all the bees have to funnel through so that they want to take care of those cups. That's an interesting thing. With mine, I'll have to whip up a new Layens hive just for that, because where what I've got now with the 3 hives in one box, there's 3 entrances. I don't know that I could get that funneling effect, or maybe I don't need that funneling effect to have those bees want to take care of those the queen cups.
If you were doing it queenless, it wouldn't be an issue, but the Ben Harden method is a queen right, and you have to make sure that the queen cups, that the queen never touches the queen cups, because
if she gets, what is it? It's MDB. No, that's the wrong acronym. It's her pheromone. If she gets her pheromone on those cups, then the other bee workers won't.
It's one of her foot pheromone or whatever it is.
Yeah. So that's so if I did it queenless, that would work. And so here's the guy that's saying, I'm going to graft queens, right? Let's take a step back into beginner's land. When I did inspections at Bo's, and when I did inspections at Jason's, and when we did inspections with yours, you guys were able to, okay, there's the queen. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. When I was doing my inspection of my Swarm 1 hive, I was searching best I could, just looking, and I just could not find that queen. So how do you get better at trying to locate the queen? And is it possible? I guess what I'm hoping is that I just didn't, she stayed down low and was hiding. So as I was inspecting the frame, she just wasn't there.
That's one of those skills that just takes a lot of practice. I'll give you a few tips and tricks and hints.
Okay.
Firstly, the queen can hide fairly easily. If she's in the midst of laying an egg and her abdomen is down in a cell, you probably won't be able to find her.
Oh, okay.
She also can duck through holes. Today I saw that. I happened to spot the queen just as she was ducking through a hole in the comb to cross over to the other side of the comb. So she can be doing that. New queens will often hide in the bottom of the box. So if you've got a smaller hive, she might be down there somewhere.
Right. When
you're looking for her, what I would recommend is situate yourself so you have good light to see. Pick up your frame or your bar or whatever, however you're doing it, and give each side just kind of a systematic pass through as you're watching. And if you don't see what you're looking for within 10 seconds, just move on. So 10 seconds one side, don't see it. It might, maybe even 5 seconds. If you don't see her, turn it over, look at the other side. You don't see her, move on. The harder you look, it seems, I've heard this from many different people, and I've seen it myself when I'm trying to find the queen when I'm doing queen rearing. It seems like at a certain point, the longer you look, wherever she's hid, she's gone, she's not coming out, you're just never going to find her. Because wherever she is, she's hidden and she's staying there. It seems.
Right.
So, best chance to find the queen, I think, is get in the hive, go straight for approximately the middle of the brood nest, no smoke, pull the frame, look it over. Eventually you'll develop a kind of intuition about whether or not she's on the frame that you've pulled.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times I'll pull out a frame and I'll just, well, first of all, if it's full of capped brood, she's not there.
Oh, okay. All right.
If it's all capped brood, there's no open brood, she's not there.
Yeah, there's nothing for her to do there.
If it's freshly hatched capped brood, it depends on how freshly it is, because between when the adult bee emerges and when she lays another egg could be a day or two. So she may be there, she may not be there. She's generally going to be found. Bees queens don't lay eggs like from left to right or up to down or down to up, whatever. They tend to lay in more of a spiral pattern.
Yeah, I read that somewhere.
So if you're looking
counterclockwise.
Yeah, if you're looking at, like, you're seeing like eggs or freshly hatched brood, open brood, you could look for her more in that area, sort of on the periphery of wherever that zone is.
Okay. That's helpful.
And so the important things are don't work too hard at it. Just give it a quick scan. If it's not there, it's not there. Don't look for what you think a queen should look like necessarily. My method is to just look for something that's not a worker. Look for something that's abnormal or not the same as everything else. So you'll spot a lot of drones that way.
Yeah.
Because drones are also not workers. But instead of looking for something specifically that looks like a queen, because not all queens look the same, you're looking for something that doesn't look like a worker.
Right.
That seems to work for me.
And I'm sure you've said this before, but I don't remember. What are your thoughts on queen marking? It seems like something I wouldn't want to do because it's extra risk to hurt the queen.
I have done it. There's always an extra risk with hurting the queen. Anytime you open the hive, you risk hurting the queen. If you handle the queen at all, you risk hurting her. She's not fragile, so don't worry too much about it. But every time you mess around, there's going to be there's a possibility that you're going to injure her, kill her, smash her, something, that's that possibility. So there's that to think about. I don't as a normal practice. I do sometimes when I want to keep track of how old the queens are, like if I'm worried about breeding. And if you have a low enough number of hives, you might be able to recognize the queen by the pattern of the color on her abdomen.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Sometimes not. Sometimes all your queens look the same, so it's not going to help. And it's quite possible that the daughter of a queen would look very similar to her also, so it might not. I tried back in the early days when I was getting really excited about rearing queens and stuff. I took pictures of everyone and made a spreadsheet so that I had all the queens, and pretty much gave that up pretty quick.
See, that's my style, and what I'm realizing is it's not really practical. Now, if I had one of my sons or my wife out there taking pictures of everything I did, I could recreate, the notes for that, but that's not really always practical.
Yep, that's true. It's if you're trying to keep track of it on that granular a level, I think you're just wasting your time.
And driving yourself closer to insanity.
That's also true, because you really need to, in a very real sense, let go of control. As a beekeeper, like right now we just got a little dog. We're trying to teach him to we're trying to give him commands, and then he follows the commands. Trying to get him to go to the bathroom outside would be real nice. But bees are not going to do anything you want to do. So you have to learn how to work within their framework to get them to do closer to what you want to do. You can't command them. You can't make them. You can't micromanage them. It's got to be done organically.
There is one thing you can make them do.
What's that?
Sting you.
That's true. Though there's been times when I was trying to do bee sting therapy where I could not get bees to sting me.
Oh, really?
Like very young bees, it seems, would not do it. If you get a grizzled old forager bee, yeah, no problem. But you get a very soft young nurse bee, she might not sting you.
Is it positive? Would a nurse bee be developed enough to do that? Yeah, I guess it would be.
I would assume so, but I don't know. I couldn't get this bee to sting me. See, for every so-called rule, there's always exceptions.
So I'm trying to think of what else.
You mentioned
there's a couple things that hurt my brain when people talk about having a purebred, this race of bee or that race of bee. I was talking with Jason about this the other day. But other than like artificial insemination, is there any way to have a air quotes purebred queen of this form or another?
That is something that hurts my brain also. In fact, I had somebody text me the other day and start to argue with me. He claimed to be a queen breeder. He started to argue with me about the importance of breeding, and it seems people who are really into Russian bees tend to argue that a bit more, as he was. And my view on the whole thing is that there is no magic bee. There's no special bee. There is no bee that you can buy that makes you treatment free and everything will be wonderful. And all your hives will be above average, and all your queens will be anyway. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And there's a couple reasons for that. The primary one is because bees outbreed so readily and so quickly, and queens breed with so many drones, and bees' rate of genetic recombination, the rate that the way that traits are passed on is just so finely divided, and I'm trying to think of a good word for it. It's just so homogeneous. The bee world, the genetics in the bee world are often so homogeneous. Things are mixed up in you mix paints together, you get a different paint. Bees don't pass on traits the way that we think, that we often see that mammals do.
Right.
And so, I'm sure there were Russian bees at one point, but Russian bees were imported into this country many years ago, and they've been bred and interbred with the local stock for many years. And if you want to work with a breed of bee and do all that stuff and call it a Russian bee, fine, call it whatever you want, but it's just a word. It doesn't carry any inherent truth.
Right.
There are no special bees. You can start with any given swarm and split it and create new hives. And that's, I'm actually kind of glad that my main historic stockyard died, as I had a chemical kill, I think. I'm kind of glad that happened because it finally forced me to practice what I preach. And so I'm starting back all from a grand total of 2 swarms that I had caught a few years back. And I'm up to, I don't know, like 17 or something right now. So I've been saying it can be done for all these years, and now I'm actually doing it.
And now, yeah.
And it's working. And, all beekeeping is local, and it's important to develop bees that perform well in your area.
Right.
It may be that some bee that you can buy from somewhere else stores away the honey like nobody's business. But what are the odds that that bee will have the traits needed to survive long term in your area?
Right. If you take like the Africanized bees, they aggressively pursue it. They store it away, but they can't cluster through the winter.
Right. So there's all these different traits that compete, and it's important to understand that honey production is not everything.
Right.
I'm not doing this for honey production. There's lots of years where I don't make any honey, especially the last 5 or 6 years as I've been moving around. I'm doing this for the enjoyment of the hobby. Now, part of that enjoyment of the hobby for me is making some honey, is selling it and making a little bit of profit to pay for everything. And that's fun. That's that's good part of it.
Yeah.
But if I'm relying on the bees to make me happy through their performance, I'm probably going to be disappointed.
Right. Yeah. And I've heard you say that in other podcasts too. That's my take on it is if like I'm not expecting any honey this year. But the following season, if I get honey and I sell it and I make some money, well, then that just goes back to, basically refunding, I guess, if you will. And the concept of being an avid woodworker dovetailing in with being an avid beekeeper, those two things fit so nicely. If I remember correctly, if you want to purchase a 19 frame lay-ins, from horizontalhives.com, Dr. Leo's website. I think it's somewhere in around the $4.99 or $5.99 price range. Oh,
go ahead.
Sorry, you can edit that out. Anyway, it's expensive, and so when I built mine, I was looking at if I had purchased that at retail, it would have been a lot of money. But I'm into it for I don't know, 4 or 5 2x10s and a bunch of other scrap lumber that I've either had laying around or I picked up at some construction site to make frames. And I've gotten quite good at making the layins frames. And so it's just one hobby really supplies the other one. The only thing I don't enjoy is painting. And as I was a little bit jealous of Joshua, the guy you had in a previous podcast, with all the swarm traps that he's got ready. I've got 6 built, but none of them are painted. So I've been using them for collecting swarms, but I don't have them out, waiting to collect a swarm. So
yeah, I don't really like painting either. I'd like to get set up to do paraffin dipping rather than painting, but that's kind of an investment, and I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, there was somebody in the local Southeast Idaho beekeepers group, whatever, and he just put it out there. He says, "Hey, I'm going to be doing paraffin dipping on such and such a day. If you want to bring your things," there were a couple things that I didn't understand because I've not learned anything about that. There were a couple things that he said, if your equipment is like this or this, then no, don't even think about bringing it here. But other than that, bring it on by. We'll be cooking them for like 14 minutes at 270 degrees Celsius, yada, yada. But that's not something I've learned anything about.
I was going to throw in, you mentioned bees getting loose in the car. You know what the solution for that is?
What?
Just open the windows. Drive as fast as you can.
So Jason transported a medium box of medium frames from my house back to his house, and he just carried them out there, set them in the back of his van, and I said, "Are you going to drive like that?" And he goes, "Yeah, why not?" I said, "You're going to keep your veil on?" He goes, "No, just roll down the windows." No, to be fair, I mean, he lives like 2 blocks away from my house, but, yeah, no, oh my gosh, there were so many different things that I had, questions for you. I know we're going long on time and I don't want to overstay my welcome.
We can go as long as you want. You're the one that's an hour ahead on the time zone.
Oh, so yeah, so we're late night family. I think we're gonna get together and watch an episode of Doctor Who here pretty soon. But,
nice. I haven't watched this season yet.
Oh yeah, well, so we bought the David Tennant season, the next season, and I think we've got one more on DVD. I haven't seen the newest one yet. Tennant's
the best.
That's kind of like our nighttime. Okay, it's the end of the day, and we kind of gather on the TV and watch that. So much appreciation for you and all the time that you put into making the podcast. I mean, I'm sure that you get some enjoyment out of it from your end, but for me as a newbie, I've learned so much. I've traveled a lot of miles listening to your voice. And it occurred to me right before we met 2 years ago. I listen to podcasts usually at like 1.6 or 1.7 times the normal speed. And we all sound quite a bit different at 1.67 times the normal speed than we do in real life. So as I was driving to California on my trip where I was going to be visiting you on the way back, I thought, I need to listen to you a little bit on the 1.0 scale. Oh, here's something. This one might remind you. So I've got a military background, and we usually always use last names. And I kept calling you Parker, and a couple of times you're like, "Can you just call me Solomon?" Like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I just don't prefer to be called by my last name. I did some sports, and that's where a lot of people often get it from at first, is sports, because your name's on your jersey or whatever, but
yeah.
My brother's ex-fiance always called him Parker also, and I was like, I don't like it.
I had an old boss at one of the contract plants where I used to work. His name was Mike Parker, and that's all he would ever allow anybody to call him was Parker. So I don't know why, and I don't run around calling people. I don't call Jason, "Hey Anderson," I just call him Jason. And I think it was just confused and thinking more about bees than anything else. But so just huge appreciation for all the knowledge that you put out there. And I really liked what you said. And I don't know whether it was with your moderators or with the one before that, where you're like, I'm not the place to come if you want to have an A, B, C through X, Y, Z, explanation of everything. I've put out what comes, but I mean, that's the way I learn. It's like, let's talk about this and then move on to that. And, so super. Oh, here's another question I was going to ask you about. I forgot her name. You had interviewed a young lady who was working on her PhD, thesis. And you'll probably remember it from this. What she did was she did a case study, and she gathered, she had 3 groups. She had treatment free, she had some other kind of middle of the line group, and then she had the hardcore, if it's out there, we use it and we treat our bees. And she was doing a 3-year study, and I think the 3-year study would have been over last year. Do you know who I'm talking about? Do you remember anything about that?
Is that Robin Underwood?
Yes, that's her name.
Yeah, it actually, I think it was a 2-year study originally, and I think we're currently in the 2nd year.
Oh, I'm a little ahead of myself then.
I could be wrong. And you can find that, where is that? I forget the university. It's called the COMB Project. COMB as an acronym. I don't know what it stands for.
Oh, okay. I'm going to jot that down.
Robin Underwood, and you can get a hold of her. She's on Facebook also. She's one of my Facebook friends. I keep track of her. We still disagree on many things, but I do still appreciate her attempt to study treatment-free beekeeping objectively. I do appreciate that attempt.
And I did pick up on the way she was going about that. I had in my youngness of my beekeeping adventure, I've found myself in conversations with different people within the treatment versus treatment free. And I'll venture in as far as to say, there's two camps, and I've chosen to go treatment free for these reasons, and that's as far as I go. But I've run into a couple people that it was like a great white shark, chomping down onto a big bloody piece of meat, trying to convince me to go the other direction.
Yeah, we still do get those. I guess I've made quite a bit lately of how I don't argue anymore. And I've been, a lot of people don't realize this, but I end up in argument. People want to argue with me. People contact me wanting to argue with me. And sometimes when I refuse to argue with them, they will create a fictitious name and then try to argue with me as another person. So that's interesting. And they'll do this thing that I really don't like, which is they will quote me. You said in hostile beekeeping that you were, anyway, whatever I said. But now you say that you don't want to debate anymore. Like they're trying to prove that I'm some sort of hypocrite or something.
Right. Yeah.
I think
people exist in all walks.
The way that we treat people that way by holding their past statements against them, I don't think is very helpful, because it is useful that when you find new information and that new information alters your perception of the previous information, it is useful that you change your mind. This is something that we want, right?
Right.
We want people to do better when they get new information. And, over the years, as I have argued with people in the past, definitely did that, I realized eventually that it doesn't help. That usually what happens is people become entrenched in their position, and it becomes not about weighing the facts and making logical arguments and being persuaded and persuasive. It becomes about defending your position because it's your position.
Rather than being open to new information that might change your mind for the better. Yeah.
Right. It becomes about your team and about your ego, and the argument gets stuck on, I can't lose to this guy, rather than actually looking at the real points.
Yeah, so I've taken on my wife is really good with this about, the argument, if they're not interested in seeing a different viewpoint, or if you're not interested in seeing a different viewpoint, the argument is a moot point. But so what I like doing, in the local beekeeping groups on Facebook that I see when, there's beekeepers for beginners or something like that in Southeast Idaho. And I see a lot of people say, what's a good source of information? And if I'm one of the first couple to comment on that, I'll just put, Solomon Parker's got a really awesome podcast. Look him up. Rather than saying, treatment-free beekeeping podcast on such and such. I'll just use your name and they can find you that way. And I've gotten a couple people that would, just give a nod. I forgot what they type or whatever, but it was just like hey, I know what you're doing and I'm with you on that.
That's an interesting tactic. I really like that. Rather than color the conversation by introducing the buzzwords, just say, hey, this guy's got a podcast. Go check it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And my conversation with Jason, rewinding, further back into our prior conversation, that's how he explained it. He said, there's two philosophies. This is what I subscribe to. And he goes, feel free to check out either whatever direction you want to go. And the treatment free, just to me, it is the only way that makes sense. And I'm preaching to the choir here, I know, but why treat, make stronger mites and weaker bees?
Yep.
And when the few times where I've ventured further into the discussion of treatment versus treatment free, I've asked that question, but that's not how it goes. It's okay.
Yeah. And at a certain point, there's just no more to say.
Right. Yeah. So I'd say all in all, I've got a lot of remarkable wisdom from you and from Jason. If you're, talking to somebody who's thinking about getting into beekeeping, for sure, study for that year. Don't say I want to become a beekeeper, plunk down your, X number of dollars down and buy a hive and buy a package, and then they die, and then sell your stuff for, a tenth of what you paid for it. Certainly go treatment free. And then lands, have you had it? No, because you in your 2 podcasts ago last week or something like that, you said you hadn't had a chance to get a lands.
Not yet, no.
Yeah. Are you a woodworker?
I am. I work wood, yes.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm not a professional. I haven't figured out, I just lost the word now. The thing where you do corners of stuff. A router. I haven't got a router yet.
Okay.
But table saw, miter saw, dado blades.
There you go. So when I built these, I did not yet have my dado blade. In fact, the table saw that I had at that time was an old rickety contractor saw that took 14 hours to get an accurate cut.
Wow.
So I've since upgraded my my table saw to a really nice one, and got a dado blade. And so I'm looking forward to making a couple of new lay-ins, and thinking I can probably do it in a weekend, where before it took me like weeks. To get the tongue and groove joint right. And I was making the lay-ins frames using the router. And there were a couple times I'm like, think I'm putting my fingers at risk here. This isn't worth it.
Don't do that. But I have cut off a finger or two in the past, and I don't recommend it.
Yeah, no, I have a buddy of mine at work that's done that. He doesn't recommend it either. But what I did was, if you want to talk about making lands frames, I found the easiest way is I put the dado blade on as wide as it'll fit for my saw. I take a 2x6 and I'll run it over the dado blade up to, I think it's 3 3/4 inch. I'll stop 3 3/4 inch from the top. Well, sorry, I cut the 2x6 to the length of the lands frame, and then I'll use the dado blade to cut that indent, that 1/4 inch indent or 3/8 inch indent, whatever. I don't have the plans in front of me. Then I take that whole thing and I slice it on the table saw like a piece of ham, and off come the sidebars, and it's slick and it's fast, and they look good.
Nice. Yeah. I'm guessing that's how I would do it.
Yeah, and that was the hardest part for me, because I was doing it with the router and it just took so long, and I'm thinking, are my fingers worth this? And so, because when I made 2 30 frames, so I made 60 frames, plus I knew I was going to be making swarm traps, so I made another 40 or 50 frames, and it goes a whole lot faster this new way. So, but if you want to make one of those, we should either chat through email or whatever, and I'll be happy to share whatever I've learned.
Yes, I shall have to consult with you when I get around to doing that.
So, anyway, that's all I can think of for right now.
Well, great. It's been really great to have you on. It's been a great conversation. I'm glad you like the sound of my voice.
Well, usually at 1.6 times, but
here's a funny thing about that. For me, there are people who just talk too slow, and I need a greater volume of information to be entering my brain to keep my attention.
Yeah, and sometimes, it depends on who I'm talking to. Being an instructor, I have students in my class that are all different ranges, and so I've really learned to temper my voice pattern. In my past life, this seems like, a universe or two ago, I used to do technical support over the telephone. And sometimes I would have somebody talking and other times I haven't talked like, and so I'd learned to match their tempo, because if somebody's speaking really slowly, if I start speaking quickly, it confuses them. If somebody's speaking really quickly and I talk slow, it makes them impatient.
Yep, so, that makes sense. I do that oftentimes with audiobooks. Most of the podcasts I listen to aren't scripted, so the people that I tend to like to listen to are people who talk a little faster like me, so I don't usually do the speed on that, but definitely on audiobooks, because I think a lot of times audiobooks, they purposely talk slowly.
Yeah. I can really get into podcasts. Not so. Audiobooks tend to put me to sleep, and usually when I listen to a lot of my podcasts when I'm driving, and so if I'm listening to audiobooks when I'm driving, that would tend to put me to sleep, which would be a bad thing.
I read books on Kindle app on my phone to help put me to sleep. Audiobooks don't really put me to sleep. But I also, my main business, the business that I started now is driving. So I get plenty of time to listen to podcasts and audiobooks and things. It's one of the parts that I enjoy.
What kind of business?
I primarily move shipping containers.
Yeah, I think you were doing that. Maybe it wasn't your primary occupation. I think you were doing that back when I visited. Yeah,
I had just started it, I think, back then. I'm doing a little better now, gotten better at it. Do longer trips and stuff, and so it's a business. It's not super exciting. It's not, I'd thought for many years that I was going to be a water and wastewater engineer, and it turns out that I'm not really great in an office all the time. Uh-huh. I like to be out doing a variety of different things, and so beekeeping is part of that. Doing this, talking to people, podcasts, this is part of the variety of the work that I do. The truck is part of the variety of the work that I do. And one of the things about what I do, because I'm going onto people's properties and moving these shipping containers all the time, every single job is different. Uh-huh. Every single job has something weird or strange or hard, and then there's also the physical aspect, a lot of running around and climbing and staying physically fit is really good. And being able to back up a 40-foot trailer highly precisely is an interesting proposition also. Yeah. All of it is combined to keep me from getting bored with life. When I was working in an office, I felt guilty because I didn't feel like I was getting more than about 6 hours worth of work done a day. Nobody was ever unhappy with my work output. I could work really fast, but when I was done, I was done. Like, 3:00 in the afternoon, it's like, well, I'm checked out. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore today. Yeah. Well, I think I think you and I are alike like this is I know for myself, I expect a way lot more out of my day's worth of production than my boss does. Yes. I just hope she doesn't listen to this. No, I don't think she would, but, so like since 2015, I've been I've been instructing, I've been teaching. But before that, I used to travel, all over the country, and even I've done some international work. I would go to commercial nuclear power plants and work in I would support the radiological controls aspect of refueling those plants. And like what you're saying with your jobs now is every plant was different. There were always different adventures, and sometimes day to day was a new or different adventure. So I really enjoyed that. But what I didn't enjoy was I would leave in January and I'd work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day until June. Yeah, I can't do that. And I'd get home. My boys had grown, on the order of a couple inches while I was gone, and hadn't seen my wife in 6 months. And so that was it was just a hard. Now I'd make a year's worth of income in 6 months, and I'd have several months off throughout the year, which was nice. But being home and being a dad and being a husband is an everyday thing. It's not a June till September thing. I'm not saying I would never do that, but I would have to be pretty desperate for money to do that sort of thing. Yeah, it's a tough way to make a living. The work itself is exciting. If I were a single guy with no family, I'd go back to that in a heartbeat. But no, not worth it to me. And trucking is that way also. There's a lot of single guys, no family out there that just stay on the road and drive and make good money, and good for them, great. But I need variety. Yeah. I need to do lots of things. I do a lot of things here at home. I tell people I work probably 14 hours a day. I just only get paid for like 3 or 4 of them. Right. Yeah, we've got, besides our apiary grown, we've got 7 ducks, 2 geese,
I just built a greenhouse in May. Built a greenhouse.
Nice. I just built a greenhouse from about January to March.
Nice. Yeah, I wish I would have finished. I wish I would have started ours much earlier. So my wife does all the planting and growing. The only thing I take care of that's living are the bees. And she takes care of all the other things.
Awesome. All right. Well, Anthony, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and it's been a great conversation. I feel like we are very much alike in the way we think and the way we do things, and it's been good to talk to you this evening.
Yeah, it was fun catching up with you, and I'll be listening.
If you're ever in town again, feel free to stop by. I live at a different place now. Got my bees in the backyard rather than off somewhere out in the woods. And
okay.
If anybody else wants to stop by, if you're in the Southern Oregon between Medford and Grants Pass area, I am an open book. Like I say, I don't care to argue about beekeeping anymore, but if you're interested in being a treatment-free beekeeper, I will be more than happy to teach you everything I know.
And I would attest to that because he did it with me.
Thank you for listening to this episode all the way through. Here are the credits. Everything is done by me. And that was all the credits. If you want to support the podcast, I do have a Patreon page. It is at patreon.com/TFB. You can support all the stuff we do here, from the podcast itself, to the Facebook page, to the website, to the forum. That's how it all gets supported. And for those of you that do support the podcast, I really appreciate your support, and you help make all this happen. If you want to find any of the stuff we do, just go to the Google machine and type in Treatment-Free Beekeepers, Treatment-Free Beekeeping, or Solomon Parker, and you will find us eventually. If you listen to the podcast regularly, you know all the stuff that we got, so I don't need to tell you. If this is your first episode, go listen to any one of the other episodes and you'll get everything you need to know. At any rate, it's after 10 o'clock, and I'm getting a little loopy. So have fun keeping bees, and that's an order.